After my stepmother took control of the household, my reputation gradually hit rock bottom. Everyone in town said I was wanton and behaved recklessly, completely lacking the proper decorum of a daughter from a prestigious family. I once overheard my stepmother whispering with my younger sister,
"Our family has an old marriage alliance with the Pei family. If the young master of the PA family comes to despise her, this marriage will naturally fall to you. You possess both virtue and talent, while she is just a motherless country bumpkin with a terrible reputation. How can she possibly compete with you?"
Pei Qingchi would never believe such lies. He and I grew up together, and he passed the imperial examinations at the age of 20, making him a man of peerless talent. Yet, I still had my doubts. After all, we haven't met in several years. I should go to him in person to explain the truth. I was neither wanton nor reckless. It was my stepmother and sister who deliberately sought to ruin my innocence. Therefore, when the PA family's matriarch invited me to the capital for the flower festival, I did not decline. In the central courtyard, the maid led me to look for Pei Qingchi, and we happened to overhear him talking with his classmates.
I heard you have a betrothed from childhood, who comes from a remote place like Hangzhou.
What a waste of brother Pei's peerless talent and looks. You are worthy of marrying a princess, yet you have to settle for that crazy country girl.
The third young lady of the Duke of Ding's estate. Doesn't she hold affection for brother Pei?
In my opinion, it would be better to break that engagement and marry the third young lady instead.
With a loud clatter, a porcelain cup shattered, and everyone instantly fell silent. Pei Qingchi's voice was calm and devoid of emotion.
An alliance ordered by parents and arranged by matchmakers. If I were to break the promise and seek another marriage based on status, how would the world judge me, Pei Qingchi? And how would they judge the third young lady? And how would they judge the third young lady? Please watch your words, gentlemen.
The young nobleman, familiar with him, observed his expression and spoke up boldly.
But if that Shen girl willingly breaks the engagement, then no blame can be cast on brother Pei.
But this time, Pei Qingchi remained silent. A few days later, the PA family hosted a flower viewing banquet. I sat at the far end of the table, silently studying the delicate orchid before me. Half an hour ago, Lady Pei requested to use flowers to paint a scene. Pei Qingchi had specifically sent someone to bring this orchid to me, the Pei matriarch said with a warm smile.
"Qingchi has you in his heart."
The corners of my mouth twitched, for sitting just half a table's distance from me was the third young lady of the Duke of Ding's estate, Liang Miaoyi. She had also received an orchid from Pei Qingchi. My orchid was of the most common variety, with only a few sparse buds and withered-looking stems. Liang Miaoyi's orchid, however, was fragrant and elegantly beautiful, drawing praise from the surrounding noble ladies.
This is the extremely rare lotus crown orchid, extraordinarily precious.
Could it be a gift from some young master?
Let me guess. Could his surname be Pei? A delicate flower for a noble lady.
Indeed. Only Miaoyi is worthy of such a flower, unlike some people who are only fit for common weeds.
The crowd burst into laughter. Liang Miaoyi glanced at me subtly and cried out softly. She cried out softly.
"How annoying. Don't mention it again. You girls always love to tease me."
She looked at me with a gentle smile.
"Little sister Shen, the customs in the imperial capital are different from those in Hangzhou. Everyone is purely discussing the plants, definitely not the people. You must not take it to heart."
I lowered my head and smiled. "It is fine." Liang Miaoyi glanced at my weed and suddenly smirked.
"When I was born, the orchids were in full bloom, so my father gave me the childhood name Lanner. What a coincidence. Little sister Shen loves orchids too."
I actually detested orchids. When I was young, I was playing with my younger sister. She pushed me to the ground, and I crushed a pot of partially bloomed orchids. The orchids were actually fine, but my stepmother was furious. In the dead of winter, she forced me to kneel on the ice. I knelt until my knees went numb, and it became a chronic ailment. Whenever winter came, my legs would ache terribly, as if pierced by needles. Pei Qingchi knew all of this. To comfort me, he sent knee guards back with a family letter. He said they were made by the finest weaver in the capital. Since he wasn't by my side, he wanted the knee guards to keep me warm in his stead. "Once we are married, I will never let anyone torment you like this again." Those words from our youth had once been so resolute. Looking at the withered, scrawny orchid in front of me, Liang Miaoyi's sweet, delicate face suddenly felt a bit grating. I said coldly, "Orchids are what I detest the most." Liang Miaoyi's expression instantly froze. A moment later, the verdict was reached on the paintings sent to the ladies for evaluation. The Pei matriarch said cheerfully,
"It just so happens Qingchi hasn't left yet, so I asked him to come and appreciate them. He said this orchid painting is exceptionally well done."
Her gaze swept toward me, paused for a brief second, and then turned to Liang Miaoyi.
"Miaoyi, your brushwork is outstanding, and you have won first place. Qingchi specially prepared this writing set. as your prize.
The young ladies showered her with praise.
She truly is the daughter of the Duke of Ding. Even her painting is superb.
The inkstone is carved with orchids. Could young Master Pei have chosen it specifically for Miaoyi?
Oh my, that is truly a match made in heaven. It makes one so envious.
Liang Miaoyi blushed and generously distributed the fine ink to everyone.
There is enough for everyone. No more nonsense.
Someone teased her.
What if I want that orchid inkstone? Would you be willing to part with it? Third miss.
Amidst the chatter and laughter, a simple childish voice suddenly spoke up.
Orchid painting. Want to see.
I turned my head to look. A young man was squatting at the edge of the courtyard. He had handsome features and a posture as straight as a pine tree, but unfortunately, his expression was vacant and foolish, ruining his good looks. The Pei matriarch's face darkened slightly.
Song Lin, get out of here.
The handsome young man didn't seem to understand. He only mumbled foolishly.
Orchid painting. Want to see.
A socialite's eyes darted around as she said playfully,
To be honest, I would also like to appreciate the third Mrs. Orchid painting. In previous years, the winning paintings were always displayed for everyone to admire together. Why is it being kept hidden this year? Could it be that young Master Pei and the third miss really have some secret affection, so he wants to keep her painting all to himself?
Both the PA matriarch and Liang Miaoyi looked highly embarrassed. Everyone knew that Pei Qingchi and I had long been betrothed. Casual teasing was one thing, but if Pei Qingchi really kept Liang Miaoyi's painting in secret, it would be considered an illicit affair, which was utterly shameless. Liang Miaoyi turned her face toward the Pei matriarch.
Why don't we display all the paintings so that everyone can judge them?
Caught in a dilemma, the Pei matriarch had no choice but to order her servants to bring them out. The scrolls were all spread out under the bright sun. 100 kinds of exotic flowers appeared vivid and lifelike. That handsome young man also squeezed in to take a look. Still looking foolish and dazed, he pointed at the paintings and said in a silly voice,
This one is ugly. That one is beautiful.
The one he pointed to as very ugly was precisely Liang Miaoyi's painting of the secluded orchid, and the one next to it was my painting of red winter plums on a sheer cliff. The socialite who had just teased Liang Miaoyi smiled and said,
Well, he is not wrong. Even this gentleman can tell whose brushwork is superior. Yet, our third-place scholar somehow couldn't. I wonder if he is blind in his eyes, or blind in his heart.
Liang Miaoyi's eyes instantly welled up with tears. She threw the inkstones, brushes, and paper all at me. Lowering her voice, she said coldly,
What a scheming mind you have, Miss Shen. I thought you were just a girl from a humble family. It seems I underestimated you. To think you would collude with this fool to humiliate me. But don't get ahead of yourself. With my family background, marrying into the PA family is no difficult task at all. I haven't done it only because I didn't want to. Definitely not because I'm afraid of you. The days ahead are long. Just you wait and see.
Liang Miaoyi flung her sleeves and stormed off. The Pei matriarch hurriedly chased after her to comfort her. With that, the flower appreciation banquet dispersed. All the previous bustle vanished into thin air. I pushed aside the writing materials carved with secluded orchids, and only held my painting of red winter plums on the cliff close to my chest. I had studied painting under a master in the capital since childhood. This painting captured the red plums blooming proudly in the freezing wind. The ultimate vitality, the ultimate brilliance. Pei Qingchi pretended not to see it, not because the painting was unappealing, but because the painter herself was unappealing to him. Amidst the dead silence of the hall, that foolish yet handsome young man suddenly walked over. With a dazed expression, he reached out and wiped away my tears. Pointing at my painting, he said,
The most exquisite.
After the flower appreciation banquet, word has it that Liang Miaoyi made a scene with Pei Qingchi. The next day, Pei Qingchi, who had been avoiding me at all costs, finally sent someone to summon me. Many guests were seated around the pavilion. Sitting right in the center was actually the handsome young man I had run into yesterday. Unlike his disheveled and downcast look from yesterday, he wore extremely exquisite robes today, with the pendants at his waist clinking softly. Setting aside his vacant gaze, he looked radiant and incredibly handsome. Only, why was he here? The handsome young man turned his head to look at me and smiled foolishly. The young master in green robes beside him looked at me and suddenly froze. Not until someone beside him gently tugged at his sleeve did he snap out of his daze as if waking from a dream. He was nudged forward by others, his voice stiff as he spoke.
Are you the young Miss Shen who came from Hangzhou?
I nodded. Yes, I am. May I ask where Lord Pei is? But he just stared at me, delaying his answer for a long time. There was a hint of amazement in his expression, and perhaps a touch of regret as well. I looked at him, completely bewildered. My lord, he remained silent, his jaw clenched tight. The young masters of noble families behind him began to laugh with malicious intent.
The man you are to marry is right in front of you.
Yet, they were pointing at that handsome, foolish young man. In fact, at yesterday's flower appreciation banquet, I had heard the Pei matriarch call out his name. His name is Song Lin, not Pei Qingchi, but I still stepped forward, brushed the fallen blossoms from his collar, bent down, and said with a beaming smile, "Are you my future husband? I sewed a sachet for you. Would you like to have it?" Song Lin looked at me in confusion and said foolishly,
No, marry you.
With that, he took the sachet, tucked it away as if it were a precious treasure, and stared warily at his surroundings, as if terrified that someone might snatch it away. I smiled softly. "I will sew one for you every day from now on." "All right." Beside us, Pei Qingchi's face suddenly darkened like water. Shen Yinong led Song Lin away. Pei Qingchi stared at their receding figures, his expression extremely unsightly. Sachets, sword tassels, protective amulets, similar small items Shen Yinong had sent him countless times before. In his youth, he would still treasure them carefully. But ever since he passed the imperial exam as the third-place graduate, whenever he received these items again, he only felt annoyed. His status was no longer what it used to be. Yet Shen Yinong was still stuck in the past. Pei Qingchi detested these little trinkets, and detested even more that past marriage alliance that bound him. It was merely because her grandmother had saved his own grandmother.
Why should I have to sacrifice my own lifelong happiness to repay it?
Shen Yinong had noticed his aloofness. Gradually, she stopped making those things. Later on, she didn't even send letters anymore. This was for the best. Pei Qingchi thought indifferently, lest Miaoyi always get jealous and end up unhappy. But after being apart for several years, seeing the now mature Shen Yinong with his own eyes, and seeing her give her true feelings and smiles, all to another Pei Qingchi, an indescribable irritation welled up in his heart. Clearly, that sachet should have been his. His companions did not notice and continued to tease.
That village girl truly has no discernment. She didn't even stop to think, how could the brilliantly clever third-place scholar be so dull?
A crazy girl and a simpleton. I think they're a perfect match.
Why not listen to Liang San's advice? Send over a flask of wine tonight, might as well help make a good match.
Amidst the unbridled mocking laughter of the crowd, but Pei Qingchi's face was sullen, crushed the wine glass. Although Song Lin's robes were fine, but it fit him very poorly. The sleeves were too short, and the shoulders were too narrow. It was probably Pei Qingchi's clothing. After all, he was much taller and broader than Pei Qingchi. Seeing how uncomfortably tight it was on him, I said, "Take it off, and let me alter it for you, alright?" He sniffled, looking at me in utter confusion. I recalled the whispers I had just overheard, where those young noblemen mocked him at will, calling him a fool, who had nothing but brute strength and couldn't understand human speech. They said if told to go east, he would insist on going west. If told to sit down, he insists on standing up. I wonder how much suffering he has endured in this snobbish Pei manner. My heart ached with sorrow, and I let out a sigh. "It is fine if you don't want to take it off. I was just worried you'd feel too constricted." But when I looked up again, I saw he had already swiftly taken off his outer robe. He was pulling at his inner robe, his collar falling open, revealing his firm shoulders. My face flushed instantly. I pressed down on his hand to stop him from going further. No need. In my haste, I used too much force. I didn't expect him to be so fragile. Knocking him backward onto the daybed, he bruised his forehead, leaving a red mark. Song Lin sat up, rubbing his forehead. He took my hand, staring at me in confusion, yet he refused to let go.
Pardon my rudeness, please forgive me.
I took Song Lin to get some clothes made before I came to the capital. My father, ignoring my stepmother's objections, insisted on giving me a large sum of money. He wanted me to dress exquisitely to make sure I pleased Pei Qingchi, but I had no desire to please anyone, so that money had no use. It was just enough to get some clothes made for Song Lin. The shop assistant wanted to measure Song Lin, but he absolutely refused. Such a tall and large man, looking as aggrieved as a small beast, staring at me with watery eyes. When the assistant tried to force it, he shoved him away with a single sweep of his hand. The aggrieved small beast instantly turned into a fierce wild beast. The assistant came to complain to me with a long face.
My lady, your husband only listens to you. Why don't you measure him yourself?
I went in with a blushing face and commanded him with a bit of a guilty conscience. "Stand straight and raise your arms. I need to measure your waist." Song Lin stood straight obediently, his obsidian-like eyes staring at me without blinking, making my face grow even hotter. I raised my voice in a show of bravado. "Don't look at me. Close your eyes." He obediently closed his eyes, but as he turned, he lost his balance and fell into my arms. I caught the faint scent of tea from his hair and suddenly felt a bit reluctant to push him away. Beauty truly is a dangerous distraction. Once the clothes were finished, I took Song Lin to pick them up. There were 6 outfits in total. Every single one made him look incredibly noble. He stared blankly at himself in the bronze mirror, frowning, as if looking at a stranger. My heart felt a bit heavy. The maids at the Pei residence had told me that Song Lin was originally born into a noble family. His father was the Marquis of Zhongyong, and his mother was the Grand Tutor's only daughter. He was the only male heir in the household, cherished by the entire family like a precious gem, possessing supreme nobility. But 10 years ago, Prince Jing rebelled. The Marquis of Zhongyong was found to have secretly colluded with Prince Jing and was immediately sentenced to death. The Marquis's wife went to the palace to plead his innocence, only to be sent away with a cup of poisoned wine. When the palace officials arrived, they found that he had been so traumatized by his parents' deaths that he had been frightened into a state of simple-mindedness. When the news reached the palace, the young emperor fell silent for a moment and said slowly,
"Considering his grandfather was once our mentor, spare his life."
When the heir of the Marquis of Zhongyong was born, his grandfather was in the palace giving lectures to the crown prince. The usually stern grand tutor was uncharacteristically beaming with joy. The crown prince was curious and asked him the reason. That day, they happened to be studying the Great Northern Desert. The young crown prince personally bestowed a name upon the newborn, like the great wind, like the frost and snow, the Lin of majestic power, the Lin of awe-inspiring dignity. His name was Song Lin. Many years later, long after his grandfather had passed away, the name that the old man had obtained still managed, beneath the emperor's wrath, to save his life. Though his life was spared, the glory of the Marquis of Loyalty's estate was gone forever. Under pressure, his maternal aunt, who had married into the Pei family, took Song Lin in, but she detested him deeply. Her elder sister had married better than her when she was alive, and even after death, she had dumped this burden on her. The child was simple-minded and always kept silent. He was constantly criticized for how much he ate, and scolded whenever his face got a bit of dust on it. His remarkably handsome looks only made him more of an eyesore. In such an environment, the young Song Lin slowly grew up. It wasn't until he grew strong enough to snatch away their sticks and fight back that Madame Pei finally stopped daring to beat him.
That fool doesn't understand human reason, and he has brute strength.
Fearing he might sneak into her bedroom at night to seek revenge, she ordered everyone to stop beating him. Of course, they weren't allowed to care for him either.
He was extremely terrified of water. It would be best if he fell into a pond and drowned himself. If he was lucky enough to survive, once he came of age, they would just find a family for him to marry into. As a resident son-in-law, that would be that. The Pei family had raised him for so many years, so it was only right for him to repay them.
Recalling the maid's matter-of-fact tone from yesterday, I looked back at Song Lin in front of the bronze mirror, draped in his brand new robes. He looked both fascinated and completely out of his element. I gently closed my eyes, called the shopkeeper over, and told him to bring a few more pairs of shoes and select some hair crowns. Everything had to be the best, the absolute finest. When we stepped out of the tailor shop, the Lantern Festival was just getting underway. Someone was performing iron flower splashing. The sparks scattered like falling stars. Someone was selling toy drums, captivating the children who refused to leave. The streets were packed with visitors, bustling with lively energy. I only turned around for a brief moment, and Song Lin was gone. Panic seized me instantly. I feared he might be abducted. I was afraid he would be sold into a brothel, and even more afraid that he had truly drowned in the river. Song Lin. Where are you? I repeated his name in my mind. As I searched everywhere, sweat broke out on my forehead from anxiety. But then I heard a crowd cheering ahead. A young man in fine clothes was casually brandishing a longsword. His movements were elegant, bold and sweeping, flowing as smoothly as splashed ink, carrying an indescribable, carefree spirit. Song Lin, I could hardly believe my eyes. At this very moment, his gaze was sharp and piercing, like a blade drawn from its sheath. He didn't look like a simpleton at all, but in the next second, he saw me, and suddenly gave a silly smile, and without even looking, tossed the longsword back to the street performer. The sharp blade nearly struck his own foot. I almost cried out in alarm, only to see him walking straight toward me. He paused to think, then stopped, picked up the performer's battered bowl, and made a round through the crowd. Whenever a spectator gave money, he would bow. A young girl, smitten and teasing him on purpose, said, "Give us a smile, young master, and I'll give you 2 more copper coins." Song Lin ignored her completely and walked right past. The street performer chased after him in a hurry, but Song Lin was quick-witted this time. He dumped out all the coins, threw the battered bowl back to the man, and grabbed my hand, pulling me into a run. The night was gentle, the evening breeze light. As the moonlight and the lake's reflection fell between our tightly clasped fingers, it felt like a bright spring day. Song Lin, you, slow down. I can't keep up. He actually stopped. Holding my hand, he walked forward slowly. Out of breath, I asked, "Where on earth are you going?" He finally came to a halt. In front of him was a stand of candied hawthorns.
"Young master, what would you like to buy for your wife?"
The old vendor asked, not knowing which word had touched him. Song Lin suddenly became delighted. He took down another skewer, until both of my hands were full. Amused and helpless, I stopped him. "Thank you, but I can't eat this many. The money he had just earned from performing was spent instantly. Yet Song Lin didn't care at all. He opened his eyes wide, looking at me foolishly.
Very sweet. You eat will make you happy.
Inside the carriage, Pei Qingchi lifted the curtain, and this was the scene he saw. With the skewers of candied hawthorns, Shen Yinong ate one, and quickly handed it to Song Lin. The two of them shared a skewer, looking at each other, and then looking back. Even though they didn't say a single word, they both smiled in unison, as happy as two young children. Pei Qingchi's face was terrifyingly dark. In front of him, Shen Yinong had never smiled so brightly. These past few days, he had appeared before her under various pretexts, wanting to make up for his mistake at the flower appreciation banquet. It wasn't that he didn't know her painting of plum blossoms on the high cliff was good, but Liang Miaoyi loved to throw tantrums, and he had to be mindful of her. Besides, Shen Yinong was his fiancé, who had always been gentle and generous, so he assumed she wouldn't mind such a small matter. Yet, she did mind. He sent her plum blossoms and pearl hairpins, trying all sorts of ways to please her, even making Liang Miaoyi jealous and dissatisfied. But Shen Yinong had actually returned everything. Once, she even told him calmly, "I have long been betrothed. Please do not make things difficult for me." Difficult? Clearly, he was her actual fiancé, yet he could only watch helplessly as she walked toward another Pei Qingchi. How could he possibly swallow this anger? Pei Qingchi had thrown a huge tantrum at his friends, who had given him those bad ideas, but it was all to no avail. Until today, when a classmate told him with a grin,
"Your betrothed lady, at my family's tailor shop, ordered several sets of men's robes. Your birthday is approaching, so she must be quietly preparing a surprise for you."
Pei Qingchi suddenly came back to life. He knew it. Shen Yinong had liked him for so many years. How could she not have him in her heart? He put aside his essays and hurriedly ordered his carriage to take him to North Street. To his surprise, the shopkeeper of the tailor shop was very puzzled, saying that the young lady had just taken her young master to collect the clothes, and they probably hadn't gone far yet. Young master? Pei Qingchi clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. When he looked up again, he saw this very scene. The robes she ordered were not meant for him at all, but for Song Lin. On what grounds? He was her actual fiancé. His classmate observed his expression and smiled.
Even toward a simpleton, Miss Shen remains devoted. If she knew that you are the real Pei Qingchi, the world-renowned third-place scholar, who knows how happy she would be. Pei Qingchi's tense expression slowly relaxed. Indeed, how could Shen Yinong possibly like a fool? She only mistook Song Lin for him. As long as he gives her a slight hint, she will definitely return to his embrace.
Lately, Liang Miaoyi had been extremely irritable. For some unknown reason, Pei Qingchi had grown cold toward her. She had tried acting coquettishly several times, only to receive his annoyed glances in return. Although Pei Qingchi later explained that he was just too tired, Liang Miaoyi did not believe him. She had informants in the PA residence. She knew Pei Qingchi often lingered outside Shuju Pavilion, all for a chance encounter with that Shen girl who lived there. She didn't know what kind of spell that country girl had cast to make Pei Lang so deeply infatuated. She couldn't let this go on any longer. Liang Miaoyi was the youngest legitimate daughter of her family. She had been pampered since childhood and always got her way. She quickly came up with a plan. She summoned her maid.
The medicine I mentioned to you last time, give it to her tonight.
The maid hesitated slightly.
"But miss, that concerns a young lady's chastity after all. Moreover, we are in the Pei residence. If young Master Pei finds out..."
Liang Miaoyi snorted coldly.
What can he do even if he finds out, once the deed is done? I don't believe he would still want to marry her.
She paused, her smile turning even more sinister.
Besides, it was young Master Pei who had his cousin pose as him. He is her rightful fiancé, perfectly legitimate. Could she possibly blame anyone else?
This was my last night in the PA residence. My stepmother had sent word through someone, saying that he had fallen ill and needed me to return to attend to him. In truth, I knew she wasn't sick at all. She was anxious for me to return, out of fear that if I stayed at the Pei house too long, Pei Qingchi might fall for me. But returning early was fine too. I wanted to tell my father that I no longer wanted to marry Pei Qingchi. I wanted Song Lin to marry into our family instead. My stepmother had worked hard for so many years, secretly harming who knows how many of the concubine's children. As a result, there were only sisters in our household and no brothers. My father had once joked that if he was destined to have no sons, he might as well have my younger sister take a husband into the family to carry on the family line. My stepmother and sister had turned pale at the time. They dreamed of marrying into noble families to become phoenixes. How could they be willing to stay in Hangzhou? But But if I proactively proposed taking a husband into the family, my stepmother would surely agree. She had long been envious of my betrothal to Pei Qingchi. No, this would be perfect. Staying at the Pei house would only bring Song Lin constant humiliation. But if I took him back to Hangzhou, he could live a peaceful and stable life. Anyway, the PA family wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible too, didn't they? The more I thought about it, the more satisfied I felt. I drank the last cup of tea and eagerly went to find Song Lin. I wanted to tell him, Song Lin, you are about to have a home. A home with soft bedding, perfectly fitted new clothes, and as much braised pork as you want to eat. Hangzhou also has the best anchovy wontons in the world. If you like them, I will cook them for you every day. Although my stepmother is rather annoying, since I am voluntarily giving up the marriage, she will treat you a bit better. If she is unkind to you, I will never hold you back. I will even hand you a stick, so you can give her a good beating. Anyway, my reputation is already terribly ruined. Adding one more charge of being unfilial doesn't matter at all. I stubbornly asked him if he was willing to return to Jiangnan with me. How strange. I clearly only blinked my eyes. So why did my legs go weak? When did I fall into his arms? Why did the corners of my eyes feel so hot? Song Lin took my hand, and I could feel the warmth of his palm as he pulled me into a tight embrace. I looked at him with deep emotion, reflecting a completely incoherent version of myself.
You are sick.
I heard him say. His tone was so soft, and his gaze was so strange. I'm not sick. I smiled foolishly and clutched his lapel. I just like you. Song Lin suddenly smiled. That smile was very gentle.
Then you must be sick. When you are not sick, you keep your feelings tightly sealed. You don't say who you like, nor do you say who you dislike. You stay silent when you are wrong, and you stay silent when you are sad. Only the sadness flows from your eyes and turns into pearls.
I looked at him blankly, suddenly feeling that one of us was very foolish. Who was the foolish one? It must be him. But my body was getting hotter and hotter, so hot that it was pure agony. I pushed him away in annoyance. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I want to go into the lake, but my hands were held fast by him.
I cannot swim. If you fall in, I won't be able to save you.
I felt so terribly wronged that I was almost on the verge of tears. Song Lin held me firmly in his arms, his tone solemn and earnest.
Do not act on impulse. I will watch over you and keep you safe.
The night was quiet and deep. He remained steadily by my side the entire time, quietly soothing my chaotic mind, protecting me through the night, yet keeping a respectful distance. The next day, I woke up groggily. My head was still throbbing painfully. Some fragmented images flashed through my mind, but before I could see them clearly, they vanished again. It must have been a dream. How could Song Lin possibly hold me in his arms to soothe me? And how could he patiently coax me until dawn? He can't even speak a single complete sentence. I rolled out of bed. My dress was exceptionally neat, though my waist was a bit sore. It must be because the Pei family's bed is too hard. I packed my bags, preparing to go and bid farewell to Madame Pei. Just as I walked out of the small courtyard, I saw beside a cluster of tall bamboo a slender figure standing in white robes. Song Lin. The spring light is bright and pure, but he is purer still. Perhaps it was my own bias, but why did he look more and more intelligent the more I looked at him? He didn't seem foolish at all. Only when he blankly tugged at my sleeve, he turned back into a stray puppy on the street that nobody wanted.
Are you leaving? Take me with you, okay? I will only eat a little bit of food. I am very easy to keep alive.
The matriarch of the PA family agreed without a second thought to let me take Song Lin away. But as we were heading out the door, we ran into Pei Qingchi. He whipped his horse and galloped, hurrying along in great haste. He hadn't even caught his breath when he arrived in front of me.
You are returning to Hangzhou. When was this decided? Why didn't you tell me?
Under the bright sunlight, his expression was so anxious. He didn't look at all like that usually nonchalant third-place scholar. I took a step back, looked up at him, and spoke in a calm tone and indifferent. You must be joking, sir. We are neither relatives nor friends. Why should I tell you where I am going? Pei Qingchi was stunned. After a moment, he closed his eyes bitterly.
I thought you knew. Are you still angry with me? Have you really not realized all these days? Actually, I am the—
Sir, I interrupted him. Sir, I must go. Yes. I had long known he was the real Pei Qingchi. From the moment he first sent me that pot of red plum blossoms, neither the maids, Madame Pei, nor his personal servant were deliberately hiding his identity anymore. What is more, that afternoon at the pavilion, as he stood by the water in his green robe, he pointed at Song Lin and said with a smile,
That is the man you are going to marry.
Just then, I had already recognized his voice. Only, back then, he did not want to be my Pei Qingchi, and today, I did not want to acknowledge him as my betrothed either. If one repays injury with kindness, with what then does one repay kindness? Under the warm spring breeze, Pei Qingchi's face gradually turned pale. The next second, a slender, large hand reached out from the carriage and tugged at my sleeve. A beautiful but expressionless face peeked out.
It is stuffy. I want you inside.
It was Song Lin.
You are taking him back to Jiangnan.
Pei Qingchi's lips pressed into a tight line, and his tone became very strange.
Could it be that do you really like him?
I nodded. I have already written to my father. He has agreed to let me take in a matrilocal husband. Madame Pei also supports me calling off the engagement. I am taking Song Lin back to my home. Pei Qingchi's jaw tightened.
You say you want to call off the engagement.
The sunlight was warm, yet his face seemed to lose all color in an instant.
I haven't agreed to it yet. Who gave you permission to call off the engagement?
I smiled and asked him back. What does that have to do with you?
Because I am Pei Qingchi.
He finally said it.
I am your betrothed.
Just those few words. He spoke them almost through gritted teeth. I gave a gentle smile and told him with regret. But when you pointed your cousin out to me, from that moment on, the only betrothed in my heart has been him. After a long silence, Pei Qingchi closed his eyes bitterly.
Are you resenting me? Is it because of Liang Miaoyi? She comes from an excellent family and has been pampered since childhood. She fell in love with me at first sight, so I had to play along to keep up appearances. But I have always known in my heart that you are my betrothed. To her, I was only like an elder brother, looking after a younger sister, and you never told me you were unhappy. If you had told me sooner, I would have definitely changed.
As the breeze blew, his voice sounded hoarse and broken. Pei Qingchi had achieved fame at a young age and was a highly elegant gentleman. When had he ever been this flustered? I interrupted him calmly. Is it really because of Liang Miaoyi? The sunlight was clear and bright. Pei Qingchi was still waiting for my answer. I frowned slightly and spoke softly. In matters of the heart, men always tend to blame women. She did it on purpose. She had malicious intent. She wanted to hurt you, while you knew absolutely nothing. All these excuses, aren't they just too ridiculous? You are the brilliantly clever third-place imperial scholar. Your essays and poetry are flawless. Could someone as smart as you really be misled and blinded by Liao Yi? If so, wouldn't she possess the talent of a top scholar? Pei Qingchi stood frozen in place. After a long pause, he finally spoke.
I know you resent me, but it won't happen again. I will treat you well and never let anyone bully you again. Trust me just one more time. All right.
The young man made his vow solemnly, just like in his letters of the past. He said he would protect me and never let me suffer abuse. Yet, the person who had caused me the most suffering was him. Those yellowed letters had already been burned to ashes by me. The vows that once carried immense weight now felt as light as dust. Hearing them even once more felt like it would only soil my ears. No, I have already decided to have Song Lin marry into my family. Please step aside. The morning light is beautiful today, and I am taking my husband home. The golden sun sank in the west, painting the sky in molten gold. Pei Qingchi watched blankly as the beautiful couple walked away. A gust of wind blew past, carrying their conversation to his ears.
What does it mean to marry into your family?
It means taking you home and feeding you.
No, I want to eat.
Good boy. The spring breeze was full of affection, carrying the sweet songs of birds and the scent of flowers, gentle and lingering. It left him standing there alone, like a stubborn statue. The setting sun gradually disappeared, slowly replaced by the moon. The young master of the Pei family stood there, utterly lost the entire time. After a long while, he wiped away the tears from the corners of his eyes with a self-deprecating smile. From the capital to Hangzhou, it was a distance of 1,000 miles. Every day, outside our carriage, carrier pigeons would fly by. It was so strange. Yet, Song Lin didn't seem to mind at all. Occasionally, he would stretch out his hand, and those pigeons would obediently land on his arm. I was scared to death. Don't peek at other people's letters. He just smiled and pinched my cheek.
It is not peeking. It is reading them openly.
He even knew how to use idioms now. It seemed I had taught him well. Perhaps he could even pass the imperial exam and become the top scholar in the future. When we stopped to rest at the Anyang Inn, we learned of a major upheaval in the capital. The Prince of Wei had successfully staged a rebellion and would soon ascend the throne. In the tea house, passers-by were describing it vividly.
The current emperor's claim to the throne was illegitimate to begin with. 10 years ago, he executed a group of high-ranking ministers, thinking he could cover up his deeds. Little did he know His Highness the Prince of Wei had long allied with the Marquis of Zhangyang, who secretly sent him the military tally. They only waited for the right moment to enter the capital and slay the usurper.
The Marquis of Zhangyang. I couldn't help but steal a glance at Song Lin. He was single-mindedly peeling walnuts for me. Hearing others discuss his father, he didn't even raise an eyebrow. Heis, he really is still a dummy. Over there, the listeners were puzzled again.
The Marquis of Zhangyang. Wasn't he executed by His Majesty 10 years ago? How could a dead man hand over a military tally and command of the army.
I couldn't help but peek at Song Lin again. He just smiled, opening his palm to me. A neat row of walnut kernels lay in his hand.
Eat up.
I nibbled on the walnuts, while eavesdropping on the gossip.
Although the Marquis of Zhongyang is dead, his old subordinates are not. Back then, they all achieved great deeds on the battlefield with him. They were fiercely loyal subordinates. The old Marquis died of a false accusation, and those subordinates, every single one of them wanted to avenge him.
But they had long since scattered like loose sand. Without a central figure, how much could they really accomplish? True, but such secrets are naturally not for commoners like us to know. Haha, drink up.
After some time, the carriage finally arrived in Jiangnian. I had imagined my father would be absolutely furious. After all, I had brought back a fool to be alive and husband. But to my surprise, when the carriage curtain was lifted, my father was already waiting at the entrance of our home, wearing a highly flattering smile.
Yinong, your stepmother and sister have voluntarily gone to Lingyan Temple to practice Buddhism. The best courtyard in the house has been cleared out for you to live in.
I took a cautious step back and warned Song Lin, don't drink any tea they pour for you later. When things are this unusual, there must be a catch. My father wouldn't be trying to get rid of us with a cup of poisoned wine, would he? Song Lin smiled softly.
Very well.
The curtain was lifted again, and my father bowed to Song Lin with great warmth and respect.
The heir has traveled from afar. You must be exhausted. This humble official has prepared wine and a feast, just waiting for you to take your seat.
Song Lin paused slightly, then asked with a serious expression.
There is no poison in the wine, is there?
My father's face instantly stiffened, and he quickly forced a smile.
I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare.
My father was better informed than I was, so at this moment, he stood before me, looking deeply worried.
You said you wanted to abandon Pei Qingchi and find another husband. Although I was completely baffled, I accepted it. But you didn't mention in your letter that the husband you wanted to take in was actually the heir of the Marquis of Zhongyang.
I was also somewhat speechless. When I wrote the letter, he was just a silly little guy living under someone else's roof. Who could have imagined that the very first thing Prince Wei did after ascending the throne was not to purge the rebel faction, but to exonerate the Marquis of Zhongyang and his wife. He even issued a decree restoring the title of the Marquis of Zhongyang to be inherited by the heir Song Lin. The news spread across the country as if it had wings. Everyone speculated that the heir, Song Lin, who had endured humiliation and played the fool, might have been the key to Prince Wei's victory in the palace coup. Consequently, countless unwed noble ladies in the capital all turned their eyes toward this unmarried heir. The threshold of the Pei family was nearly worn down by matchmakers, but Madame Pei could only smile awkwardly.
My nephew has already gone to Jiangnan.
The matchmaker's expressions turned sour. Madame Pei quickly tried to salvage the situation.
But my son's betrothal is not yet finalized.
The matchmakers fell into a strange silence. After the new emperor ascended the throne, he criticized Pei Qingchi's writings and character, stripped him of his official rank, and demoted him to a schoolteacher. Overnight, Pei Qingchi went from being the highly sought-after new Manhwa scholar to a jinx whom everyone avoided like the plague. I heard that he later went to find Liang Miaoyi, the third young lady of the Duke of Ding's estate, Liang Miaoyi. But the gates of the Duke of Ding's manor remained tightly shut. It turned out Liang Miaoyi had contracted a strange illness and could not bear the torment of her ailment. After saying all this, my father's expression was filled with sighing emotion.
When you sent that letter saying you wanted to break off the engagement, I was originally against it, but looking at it now, you actually had foresight. That Pei family is utterly cursed. It is just as well you didn't marry him.
Pausing for a moment, he asked me very cautiously,
Jokes aside, what exactly is your relationship with the heir of the Marquis of Zhongyang now?
I felt so innocent. Just the relationship between a lady of the house and a live-in son-in-law. My father nearly spat out a mouthful of blood.
Stop talking nonsense. With his character and status, how could he possibly become a live-in son-in-law?
One of the bamboo windows was pushed halfway open. The young man in white rested his chin on his hand by the window.
But I truly do want to marry your daughter, father-in-law.
Song Lin was someone who had died once before. That year, when poisoned wine was bestowed by the imperial palace, there was originally a cup meant for him too. It was his grandmother who snatched it away and drank it down in one gulp. The Marquis of Zhongyang's lineage had been loyal for generations, accumulating a single iron certificate of pardon. His grandmother used that iron certificate to exchange for a single chance for him to enter the palace and report. Only then did the man sitting on the dragon throne vaguely recall his connection to him. Life living under the Pei family's roof was very difficult. Whether it was the people from the palace or the people of the Pei family, all of them harbored some suspicion and tried to test him. He had to pretend to be extremely foolish and simple in order to preserve his life, the life his grandmother and grandfather had fought to secure for him. In the summer of his 7th year, Pei Qingchi led a group of young noblemen to play by the lotus pond. Song Lin's foot slipped, and he accidentally fell into the pond. Standing on the shore were Pei Qingchi and the other noble sons. Pei Qingchi only laughed heartily. Though Song Lin knew how to swim, he merely stayed quietly in the water. Pei Qingchi had someone pull him back to the shore. As the heir, you actually don't know how to swim. Song Lin held onto a cycad tree, his body trembling slightly. Pei Qingchi led his companions away, turning their backs on him. At night, his father's old subordinate sneaked into the Pei manor. Seeing him covered in bruises and wounds, the man wept bitter tears.
It is this subordinate's incompetence that has caused you to suffer so much.
Song Lin helped him up and actually smiled.
My grandfather and father both fought on the battlefield. I've only suffered this little bit of injury. How can this be considered suffering?
The days passed by like this, one by one. The more foolish and simple he appeared, the more reassured the spies from the PA manor and the palace became. Beyond the imperial court, the vast net he had cast across the martial world was gradually being reeled in. Only on very rare occasions, as he gazed at the boundless night sky, would he silently wonder, once his great vengeance was exacted, where should he go? His life, divided by the blood of his parents. Looking forward was the Marquise's manor filled with blooming flowers and prosperity, blazing with supreme glory. Looking backward, amidst the ruins burned to ashes, he was the only one left. The day his great vengeance was exacted was actually also the day he lost his direction, because he had long been homeless. The day of the flower viewing banquet was actually not the first meeting between Song Lin and Shen Yinong. He had seen her very early on, or to be precise, he had seen her belongings very early on. The sachet sword tassels and peace talismans she embroidered. Pei Qingchi would often toss them aside as soon as he received them, never paying them any mind again. And so, Song Lin came to know that when she was 10, her embroidered wild geese looked like ducks. When she was 13, she was forced by her stepmother to kneel in the snow. And when she was 14, she went to the temple to pray for a protective talisman, one that was said to be very, very effective.
It is a pity my stepmother only allowed me to buy
one protective amulet. She couldn't even bear to keep it for herself, sending it all the way to the capital, only for Pei Qingchi to casually give it away to a servant. To snatch this amulet from the servant's hands, Song Lin got into a massive fight. He fought until his head was bruised and bleeding. In the middle of the night, his subordinate bandaged his wounds in the woodshed. Feeling rather puzzled, the young master had always been so patient and forbearing. Why would he start a violent brawl over such a trivial little object? Song Lin didn't know either. Or perhaps he actually did know. He just felt indignant on that girl's behalf. Her sincere heart, which had been taken for granted, was just like the loyalty and bravery betrayed by this world. He just wanted to ask the heavens why they always treated good people this way. His intervention at the flower viewing banquet was not merely a coincidence. As he grew older, his sharp edge became harder to conceal. He tried his best to avoid appearing before Lady Pei, but passing by the garden that day, he heard Shen Yinong's name being repeatedly mentioned. With mockery and disdain, he suddenly found it unbearable. And so, inside the pavilion, by the clear water, he cooperatively put on those luxurious robes and offered her a gentle smile.
Are you Shen Yinong? What a coincidence. This is the first time you've met me, but I have already known you for many years.
So long that the man standing in the dark suddenly understood that when the heavy fog dispersed and the night faded away, there was still something in this mortal world that could pull at his heartstrings, preventing him from walking step by step toward the underworld where his parents and friends awaited. In the year Song Lin turned 17, a palace coup took place in the dead of night. The dragon throne changed masters, and the plaque of the Marquis of Loyalty and Bravery was hung high once more. Yet, he chose to live in Jiangnan with his wife, planting a red plum tree and picking lotus pods. As the bitter winter faded and summer sorrows dissolved, year after year, there would be no more grief.